Welcome to the EV Geek podcast, where we dive into the latest trends and innovation shaping the EV world. We are your hosts, Joel and Sebastian, and today we have a fascinating episode lined up for you as we explore electric vehicle experience from a unique perspective through the eyes of our European guest. In Europe, the shift to electric vehicles has been both rapid and transformative, driven by ambitious environmental goals and cutting-edge technology. From charging infrastructure to government policies, the European experience with EVs offers valuable insights and lessons for the rest of the world. Joining us today is Graham Whitcomb, a European EV owner who has lived and breathed the electric vehicle revolution firsthand. We'll dive into the practicalities of EV ownership in Europe, the challenges and triumphs, and what the future holds for the dynamic sector. So buckle up as we take a ride through the European electric vehicle landscape right here on the EV Geek podcast. Welcome to the podcast today, Graham. How are you doing?
Pretty good, thank you. And thank you very much for having me on the show.
No problem. So a little bit of background. Me and Graham met in electric vehicles group online. Heard he was from England and has owned EVs over there as well as in the States here. And kind of want to get his viewpoint on electric vehicle ownership over in England and what that's like because it's quite different than here in the States. So before we dive into our discussion, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from and how you kind of got into electric vehicles?
So I'm from England. Actually, I said I've been visiting the States for the last 10 years for a bit of a change in direction for me. And we liked it so much that we decided, up sticks and family moved here. But we still have a house in the UK, and I still have an EV over there, which I've had for the last 4 years, I think, this year. 4 years, I think. Which you can't. I have an Volkswagen ID3 over there.
Cool.
And I've had it for 4 years. Always had Volkswagens, to be honest. Had 5 transporters before then. But fuel and gas prices over there was just, I think currently at the moment it's like $12, $13 a gallon of gas. And during COVID went up to a lot higher. I think we're the second highest fuel in Europe at the moment. And I was spending roughly £1,000. What would that have been? That would have been about $1,400 a month on fuel for my vehicle. And because I was spending more and more time here, I wanted to have a vehicle that I could just park up, and because of COVID and stuff like that, the fuel went up to almost, I think it was like $16 a gallon at one point. And it was just ridiculous. I'm not a poor person by a long shot, but I'm certainly not a wealthy person. And I just couldn't justify just burning that fuel out the back of the exhaust pipe. So I started, and I'm not a techno geek or anything like that, or I'm not into, barely can switch a gaming machine on, which I can't actually, my wife can. So, but when I find something interesting, the EV market actually drew my attention, and I almost became obsessed with it, and started doing research. And it was a bit of a no-brainer, really. The problem being over there at a particular time is because of COVID, the vehicles were hard to obtain because everybody seemed to have the same idea. But also the second-hand value and price of the vehicles had gone through the roof. And I think we have WeBuyAnyCar.com here in America, but my old transporter, which was 10 years old, they gave me $30,000 for it at that time, which for a vehicle that was probably not even worth half of that. So that gave you some idea of how stupid second-hand car prices have gone. So then, I decided that I was going to have an EV, and I started doing the research into chargers and stuff like that, and learning. And I couldn't find a secondhand, I decided on a brand new ID3 77 kilowatt unit, which was going to give me roughly 340 miles of range. I went and test drove one, and whilst I was test driving it, Volkswagen took it out of service, actually cancelled that vehicle whilst I was on the test drive, because I truly believe that this market-driven thing is that they didn't want to release vehicles with too much range to begin with, so they kept them fairly low. And of course, so I ended up, when I got back, I said I was going to have it. He said, well, you can't, because they've just literally, whilst you've been out, Volkswagen have withdrawn that vehicle from the marketplace. And I was like, you've just got to be kidding me. So anyway, fast forward a few weeks, and I found a second-hand one somewhere further up country that was a 58 kilowatt unit. Doctor had owned it second-hand. I think it had 6,000 miles on the clock. And it was lovely. So I literally told the dealer I was on my way. I'm coming to buy it. Don't let anybody else have it. So my best friend drove me up there, and of course, to be honest, doing all the research you want, but the first time you get behind the wheel of an electric vehicle, or this range anxiety, whatever you want to call it, sort of like, am I going to make it home? You've got a full charge, and it's only 60 miles, but I've got 300 miles of range. I should make it, shouldn't I? So of course, it was an interesting drive home. And the other thing that stunned me, even in that little car, was the performance. I've raced vehicles for the last 25, 30 years, and I've driven race cars that aren't as fast as that little car, and just made me giggle all the way home, to the point where when I got to, because you have to take a boat to get to our island where we live, I was saying to my best friend who was behind me, he said, I couldn't keep up with you. I said, you just imagine a little old lady could have this, fart and shoot herself into the back of a car. And I was just amazed. So anyway, we got the car home, and then that really sort of started it. And then I had to find a home charger, which I sort of done the research. And there's a UK brand called Zappi. I don't think you have them here, Zappi chargers. But they're also a very clever company. They do house automation for solar, Tesla Powerwalls, EVs, and they also run, on my house over there, I have an air source heat pump, which is linked to it. And of course, you can control your house completely via this Zappi home hub, and the car charger sits on it. So at night time, when you set it up, it will dump the cheapest electricity into it, which is very clever. So I think when I bought the car, it was costing, I think at that point we were at roughly 12 to 14 pence a kilowatt, which is about 15 cents, I think, at the time. It's not that anymore. I'm probably going more forward into your questions than I probably...
You're fine. Just keep talking. You're good.
Okay. So, when the car, the thing that you have to get your head around with the cars, I've been trying to tell my friends is that, you always leave home with a full tank of fuel. And that's the way to view it. Well, my wife hates going to the gas station and petrol stations. And the amount of time she's left me with absolutely naffle fuel in the car is just ridiculous. So to go home and plug the car in, and the next day you're reset to do another 250, 300 miles is just epic. So I think I've put over 15,000 miles on that little car. And it's been an absolute joy to own, to be honest. I very rarely am impressed with things like that, but I do appreciate good engineering. It's not without its pitfalls by a long shot. In fact, one of the funniest things that ever happened is the car was due a service. So I rang the Volkswagen dealer and said, this car is due a service. He said, yes, absolutely. Thinking that normally a service on a petrol or a diesel vehicle is fuel filters, air filters, and everything else. They came and I said, well, how long do you want the car for? And he said, 4 days. And I said, okay, do you want to explain why you want an electric car for 4 days? He said, yes. He said, your car's due a software upgrade. It's a pretty major one. He said, the service alone will take us about 30 minutes, but the software update's going to take us 3 days. And I said, okay, I'm curious now, why? He said, because basically we have to deinstall everything out of the car, so nothing would work. Technically speaking, by the end of it, it's just a write-off and a lump of material. Mm-hmm. He said, then when we do this, we program in everything from the lights, the windscreen wipers, to the fuel, to everything. Everything has to get reprogrammed, and that takes 3 days.
Nice.
And I was like, well, okay. I thought that was hysterical. So anyway, it's been a good car. I still have it. I probably will be changing it here in the sort of next 12 months for something else. But I'm an EV convert, to be honest.
Awesome. So how has kind of adoptions of electric vehicles kind of evolved in Europe over the past few years? Because it's happened a lot more rapidly than here in the States. So
Massively.
tell us a little bit about that, and why do you think that is?
I think because, I love America. I live here now and just things, but there are certain things here that, certain things are a hard sell. If you tell certain people here in America that this is best for them, they sort of dig their heels in and don't want to be converted from their V8 gas guzzling 4-wheel drive, jack them up, shoot them up, everything else that you can think of. But in Europe, and this is part of the European Union, and England predominantly, is that we are so robbed blind of any finances that we are able to earn or hold on to, that anything that sort of saves money for the person or add a certain quality of life is actually worth adopting. The other thing about it is, as well, I don't think they were actually anticipating the way that the EV market was going to grow in Europe and England, because it accelerated so fast. In the last quarter of last year, EVs outsold all other manufacturers of internal combustion engine vehicles of the whole lot. EVs just outsold everything. And then, of course, that also provides a bit of a problem, because in Europe, they've embraced it in such a way that, of course, they weren't ready for the public charging, taking journeys and stuff like this. I did a bit of research. We are just but a small island, smaller than the state of North Carolina that I live in, but we still, I think, in America at the moment, I think there's 165,000 public chargers. To give you some idea, in England at this present moment in time, there's 750,000. And that gives you some idea of how well it was embraced. And of course, the UK government and the way that it's trying to grow is that they just can't keep up. My wife and I took a journey in our little electric car a couple of times, and we did roughly, I think one weekend we did close to 1,400 miles in it. And the first time we did it, not a problem. I think the whole 1,400 miles cost us $25. It was easy. And of course, I think the second time we did it to go and see friends and family, every highway interstate service station, which is where these are, for every petrol station or gas station you have, there's an electric charger there. 9 times out of 10, they were all packed. They're just all electric cars were queued up outside of the service station and the rest area. So you just couldn't believe on how fast it was growing. It's like my wife and I said to each other, it's like, well, we're going to have to wait a little while because we can't go anywhere at the moment. But we do have a couple of good apps as well that helps. We have an app in England called Zap Map. And I would say this is the generic baseline of all things. And it actually will tell you, if you're driving along, it knows where you are, you plan your journey, it tells you where the service stations are along the way, or the charging points are. They'll tell you the speed of the charging application, and they will tell you if it's actually available. And it will also tell you if it's faulty, which is quite important, because as we go through this evolution, some manufacturers of charging units are still not as reliable as some others. And again, so it's nice to know you pull into one that you're going to get a charge rather than pull into one that's faulty and hasn't been working for the last 2 months. Zap Map is a very, very current app that I would say 90% of all EV users in the UK, I would think, use that app. And it's very successful. You can plan your whole journey by it. It's not technical. It's very intuitive and very easy to use, to be honest, even for a troglodyte like me. So I joined a couple of these groups, which I don't normally do, because I sort of felt compelled to pass on my experience to actually say, look, you can save yourself money here. Yes, you've got to buy the vehicle. Yes, you've got to get a home charger. But at the time that I bought mine, there was a grant which the UK government realised that so many people were taking it up that they didn't need to offer it, so they withdrew that straight away to save money. Then there was a grant to get a free charger at home, but of course, likewise, they knew that people were going to get that because of the uptake of the vehicles. So they withdrew that straight away. And the next thing is that, I don't think they were ready for the success of it. I don't think they were geared up at that point. They're still not there, but they are way, way on their way. Europe, I haven't actually been into, but I do hear that it's pretty similar. The Europeans are, if you go to Sweden or Finland or Germany, these people like to be first and better than anybody else.
I've seen that with Norway, with their EV adoption rate and things like that.
Mm.
So yeah, I've kind of seen that.
So
So another question. So you kind of talked about that they had these incentives, thing like that. What other things in Europe are kind of driving this growth of EV adoption over there?
Well, I think it predominantly there's. I suppose you can look at it a couple of ways. There's people that will always want to be greener and do better for the environment. I can't say I'm one of those people, but I do think now that we are. I've burnt my fair share of the ozone layer. I don't really, putting some back into it now is probably a good thing. But I would say if it's not financial, I'd be surprised because at the moment to fill my car up at home at the moment is probably costing me roughly $11, I think, at home. To fill it up out on the road, on the free interstate in a public charger, I mean, that's actually one of the interesting points as well. 2 years ago, you were filling up out on the road when you were driving around for roughly less than 25 cents a kilowatt. And today, it's roughly $1 a kilowatt. And that's in 2 years. So, of course, the problem being is that's actually getting up and up and up now. I mean, there's still incentives to do this, but of course, you've got to have a slightly different mindset. It's like, well, okay, I'm doing this. It is still good financially once I've got the vehicle, but it is still better for the environment. It is do this, it is that, and so on. So it does still work. And also, I think it comes down to plain. If you drive an EV and it's actually quite a good vehicle to be in. I mean, I've got a Genesis G80 electric vehicle outside at the moment until I go and buy my new one this weekend. And I have to say that is, the ID3 is quite a basic vehicle. There's no airs and graces to it, and I'm certainly going to lose money on the vehicle for what I paid for it to now, what it's actually worth because of. We're not in COVID anymore and prices have dropped considerably. But the owning of the vehicle and driving of an EV is actually quite a pleasurable experience. You say, I've driven it. And again, I think that once people get the grasp of that, and it's a lot effortless, it's like changing from a manual or stick to an automatic. It's the next phase of going to a more pleasurable way of driving, I think. So I think that's, in England, I think that once more vehicles become available at a more budgetary price, a lot more people will start buying them that couldn't afford new ones and get second-hand ones. And then, of course, that will then drive a perpetual new market that I think will grow and grow and grow. So I think it becomes a very pleasurable experience.
Awesome.
So, are there significant differences that you've noticed in EV ownership between Europe or UK and then here in the US?
Yes. Yeah, I have. So I think roughly in America, we're roughly 2 years. I was thinking about this today. Excuse me. I think we're roughly 2 years behind England and Europe here in America, give or take, because it is that hard sell here. The good side is that as we are seeing, there are way more new brands and technology and battery sizes and service, charging stations coming online and available to us than we were 2 years ago in England. I was quite limited, but of course, I still think it's going to be a harder sell here than it is in England and Europe because you've got to coax people out of what they know, what they knew, and again this beginning of range anxiety and why do I want that when I can buy a V8 for this and it's a whole thing. So I think that I think we are behind here. The good thing is that we have way more choice here now than we did a couple of years ago in England, and the prices of the vehicles have come down. I mean, you say, we're just about to change our car. The Genesis is a hire car at the moment, and we have an Atlas, a Volkswagen Atlas gas, and we are probably this weekend going to buy something electric. Which we've been testing and stuff. So there's just way more. And it's nothing to be afraid of. So I think the more people that try it, the more that it gets out here. The incentives are here. The dealers are doing such ridiculous pricing on vehicles. I'm looking at a Kia EV9 this weekend to buy. And I have to say that I don't actually need to say anything to the salesman. They've offered up such ridiculous discounts on it that it's just actually a no-brainer, really. It's probably going to be, to buy it today, it's probably going to still be that price in 2 years' time if they take the discounts away and put it back up to what it was. So yeah, I think that we are a little bit behind here, but I think that once the word is spread, once people become more aware of what it's like to drive and own an EV, I think it will catch up pretty quickly. But they do need to get the infrastructure here corrected as soon as possible. I think it was very, I don't know if you probably already know this, but I thought it was absolutely hysterical to find out that Charge America, I think it is being run by Volkswagen.
Electrify America.
Electrify America, yep.
I nearly wet myself laughing when I heard that. That was just hilarious. But yeah. So I think
staying on that topic about charging infrastructure, because it is vastly different in America as compared to the UK. How would you describe the current state of EV charging infrastructure in Europe?
Excellent. I mean, it's going to get better and better and better. You can't drive by. Like here, you can't go 10 miles before seeing a pull off to a rest area or McDonald's or whatever. And in England, you see, McDonald's actually have charging units in their car parks. And again, that's what needs to be adopted here. Grab your burger and your Coke and go and charge your car. Go and take the kids inside and put your car on charge while you're doing it. Supermarkets in England, like Walmart, Asda, in England, charging stations in the car park. While you're doing your weekly shop, put your car on charge and go on and do your shopping. And it's that kind of thing. So you can't go more than, you would have to be hard pushed to go more than 2 or 3, no, not even that, 2 miles, I reckon. And that's being conservative, and you would find yourself a charging station. In fact, it probably wouldn't even be 2 miles nowadays, because if you go on ZapMap, and that's the key to this app that they have, is that it will tell you what's in your area, where you are located at that point. It will tell you every charger and the speed of that charger that's in that area. And one of the interesting ones that I had is that offices, companies that have offices, were getting in on the act and putting grid serve chargers on the outside of their wall. I think one of the funniest ones is that my wife and I were in an area that we were getting low on a charge because we'd been to a wedding. I said, we better find somewhere so that we're ready for the morning to go on with our journey. And she went on ZapMap and she said, there's one on this industrial estate around the back of an office block. I said, why? Why would that be there? And of course, we pulled on in. The industrial estate was completely and utterly empty. All these businesses were closed at night time. And then there was this office block, and I think it was a financial services office block. And we pulled round the back, and I felt like in a minute I'm going to get arrested for burglary or something. And I pulled round the back, and there's this 150 kilowatt grid serve charger. And it was one of the most, and it was, those ones are the best finds. It's almost like a treasure hunt, because they're like the best finds, because out on the main roads they're at, like, say, $1 a kilowatt. These ones are like 50 cents a kilowatt, but they're just as fast. So you just plug in, talk for 20 minutes and off you go again, and that's it. And it was like, well, that was pretty uneventful. That's good. And we'll keep that one in mind. And you remember these places. And I think that's another thing to consider here, is that people that want to not make a profit but enhance footfall to their businesses, or traffic towards their door, put a charger outside your front door and see who comes in. It'll get busier and busier. It won't hurt. You can buy one, even if it's only a in England a 11 kilowatt one or a 22 kilowatt one, it's not going to break the bank. But of course, people will just plug in while they're viewing. If they come to look, they'll stay to buy maybe.
Right.
So
yeah, one quick question before we move on from this: is there a lot of street charging over in UK, like curbside charging, where you can kind of plug in over there, or is that not as frequent?
there is, so that's a bit of a grey area. Actually, that's a very good question, because that's probably the downside to the EV charging in the UK. There's people don't know how to get around this bit, actually. So people that lived in terraced houses, like multiple houses all built together, and the council or the local government puts a charger on the street. What they've been doing is that they've been running a cable out from their main door to their garden or whatever, but they're trying to. I've seen them where they bury it in the grout of the street tiles or something, so that it doesn't become a trip hazard. That's probably the only downside. And of course, those people, if they live in a city and they have a small EV for traveling to work because it's cheaper and stuff, there's bonuses other than that for having one in a city in England for like ULEZ charges. I don't think you have ULEZ charges here. ULEZ charges are, if you go to London, you'll be charged, I think it's $15 or $20 just to drive into the city centre. There's cameras on the gantries over the roads, and if you drive in, you've got to log on and pay your $20 to drive, just to be able to drive into the road. Well, of course, if you live in a city, then having an EV is a very cost-effective way of getting around, because if you have an EV, there's no ULEZ charges at the moment. And also things like when you have your vehicle here, a gas vehicle, you have to have it tested each year, and then you have to pay your property tax on it. Well, we have what they call road tax, and that can be quite expensive depending on the vehicle. Where, of course, EVs have slid under the radar for the last 4 or 5 years. So, of course, you've saved on driving into cities and owning a vehicle there, and you don't have to pay any property tax or vehicle tax on your vehicle per year for having an EV. That will change, because the government are losing millions, so they're not going to stomach that for much longer. So public charging it happens. There are public chargers on the side of the road, and I would imagine they'll get busier and busier, but there has to be a more professional integration on how people get their charge to their vehicles if they're going to own it. And I don't know how that works, to be honest. But there is certainly enough public chargers out there at the moment that they can fill up, but of course they're paying a difference then.
Gotcha.
All right, so changing gears a little bit, you've touched on this just a little bit, but how do UK policies or incentives impact EV ownership?
At the moment, they don't. I mean, they did in the beginning, going back a few years. But again, as I said earlier on, I just don't think they were ready for the uptake of it. It was I think it was such a shock to them all. They thought it would be drip fed in. And of course, they opted to boost this thing. They offered, like they're doing here at the moment, with $7,500 off an EV under $45,000, or under $50,000, I think it is, or whatever the thing is, and plus any other charges. I think here in North Carolina, Duke Energy are offering free charges or subsidized charges, and that all happened in the UK and probably in Europe. But I think that that day that I went to buy that vehicle, because it was over £35,000 or $40,000, I didn't qualify for the grant. They took the car. I mean, they literally got aware of it very quickly and pretty much cancelled any incentives that you could have, which was a right kick in the balls, to be honest. Because the thing is, that's actually what made it very attractive. I had my own business there for many, many years. People must have been looking at this. It was a cost-saving exercise when your fuel's that expensive, and also just to be made, subconsciously a bit greener, was a good thing. But certainly the English government seemed to take great pride in taking away anything that makes it look good. But still, owning one at the moment is pretty damn decent. The costs are still lower than what you would expect. Where it goes from here will be interesting, but we'll see.
Gotcha. All right, so we're going to move on to kind of talk about like urban versus rural, because you have a lot of rural areas over in Europe. How does kind of EV ownership and charging vary between urban and rural areas in Europe?
Well, there's 2 points to that, I think. I would think that the ratio of people owning EVs rurally would have their own charger at home. I do. I live on an island that is 23 miles long by 13 miles wide, and the charging's getting better there. But you wouldn't have bought one of these vehicles without having your own charger. That's part of the key to it all, anyway. I don't have the EV here yet, but I have a charger here already. So I think that, and what you can do with that Zap map that I was telling you about is that you can register your charger on their website, so that if you do live in a rural area and you think, I'll be a good, decent community person, I'll put it on there. If somebody is caught short or isn't maybe au fait with the way it completely works, they can see your charger and say, look, do you mind if I grab half an hour's charge so I can get onto the next one? I don't know, but it's a good community way of doing it as far as I can say. So rurally, 2 things is that, one, I don't think you would have one, but bear in mind, England is not that big. Even in the deepest, darkest delves of the countryside, I think you would be very amazed at how close you are to a charger, because of the way that the infrastructure is growing so quickly, either in a industrial estate or a supermarket or just a mall or a car park, or even on the back of somebody's office. There'll be a charger somewhere. It is really grown that way. I mean, to anybody that wants to visit England and wants to hire an EV, you would have no trouble getting to wherever you want to go all around the country if you were only publicly charging. So I don't think I don't think we have that problem anymore, the rural side of it, because you would always leave, if it was in my car, 260 miles roughly, you leave home with a full charge. Well, you're not going to do 260 miles before you get to another charger. So I think it's, we're in a good position over there. Still a long way to go, but it's again, we're that much further down the road with it, I think.
Awesome.
So, how have consumer attitudes towards EVs changed over in Europe? And are there any myths or misconceptions that are maybe unique to Europe that maybe we don't have here in the US?
I think the big one will always be range anxiety.
Range anxiety. Yep.
I think if you're
Yeah, I own a EV6 and a Model Y. And what do you own, Sebastian?
I've got a Chevy Bolt.
Okay. When was the last time that you guys had range anxiety?
I don't think I ever have.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
no, I've been good.
That's the point.
Yep.
Is that
Right.
you are a combustion engined vehicle owner and you have no idea. I took the electrician that came to fit my car charger here at the house last week, getting ready for our new one, never been in an electric car in his life. So I said, hop in the Genesis, and it probably wasn't a good idea to stick him next to a racing driver in an electric vehicle. So he was absolutely gobsmacked. And then when I told him how much it cost to charge that car up at home, it was like, this is the information that needs to get out there. It needs to be that you actually don't need the range anxiety is something that is for somebody that doesn't understand that these things are capable of, and that it is just a complete new way of motoring. Once you get your head around that, you always leave home with a full tank of fuel, so to speak, and that I'm 53 years old. I do not have a 260-mile bladder anymore, so I'm going to stop somewhere and have a cup of coffee. And this is what my wife and I do. We'll get somewhere near within 50 miles of wherever the charge goes, and we'll stop. We'll grab a cup of coffee. We'll use the restroom and put the car on charge. And by the time we get out and have eaten our sandwich or anything else, within 5 or 10 minutes, we're fully charged and we're off again. So I think that people have to change their point of view. That only comes with talking to people like yourselves, having a go in people like my car, the garages maybe putting loaners out there going to shows and learning more about it, and just getting this new way around, because it is it is coming.
Mhm.
It's not going to go away. With the oil and fossil fuels and just the cost of what it costs to service and run and do and everything else. EVs are the future at the moment until somebody comes up with the next big idea.
Yep.
Maybe that's hydrogen. I don't know. I have an argument with my very, very best friend in the world, and he was the one that took me to pick the car up in England. And oh, he's such a stubborn old git. But the funny thing was I simplified it. That let's say we go on a journey together. He had this sports car thing. I said, each time you need to fill up fuel, I fill up with electricity. Every time we pull into a service station, you put $100 in your car. I put 10 in mine. And then we go on to the next one. You put another 100 in yours. I put another 10 in mine. And his only argument was, yeah, but I don't want to be stood for 30 minutes. I said, time yourself every time you go to the service station. And within 10 minutes, he was still at the same point.
Mhm.
So you were still stood still, whether you go to the restroom or grab a cup of coffee or do something. So all these arguments kind of fall over. The only thing, as I said to my I said, you're down £200, and I'm down 180, and I'm still £180 better off. That's money in my bank account, and I'm not paying road tax or property tax, and I'm not paying any charges to go into the cities like you are. And of course, when you start putting it into a monetary term, the world is not a cheap place to live in anymore. Anyway, my whole argument is I'm trying to keep whatever money I've earned in my bank account rather than, in England, a gallon of gas is 75% tax. And I don't like paying tax that much.
All right. So one final question before we kind of let you go for the evening. What advice would you give someone considering buying an EV in Europe for the first time?
In Europe or here?
There.
I
You
think
come across anyone, you're not as hard to sell in Europe as it did in the US because basically people in the US don't like being told what to do. I mean, that's
No,
basically that's what it comes down to. We don't like being told what to do. So how do you handle those people when they come up to you, the electrician or your friend, and they're considering buying an EV? What advice do you give them?
I think you just, like I did in the very beginning, you have to do your homework. EVs actually pluck a little bit of interest into your thoughts. It's like, well, there must be something in it because everybody's buying it. Look at all these cars that are advertised now, and look what BMW are doing, and look what Audi are doing, and look at what the new Range Rover EVs coming. Look at all these things, and so eventually, what you do is that you pique an interest. And what I would say is that run with that interest because you'll be very surprised what you'll find out. Go and drive a couple. For somebody that, I'm not buying one, I'm not buying. Well, then just humor yourself and go and test drive one because you'll probably wet yourself laughing at what an electric car will do, but also then relate to it in financial terms because they're not as expensive as they used to be. That's for sure. There's so many deals out there now, and just before you go and sign on the dotted line for your next ICE car, your internal combustion unit car, just go and look at the alternative in an EV. Choose a few, go and test drive a few, and just see what you like. And if it is still what you're still not sure, then don't do it. But you are only just probably, one, inevitably putting off what you're going to have to do. Two, you're going to spend more money than you need to spend in running it. And three, I think it's a more peaceful way of driving now. I've done my fair share of thousands and millions of miles of driving, and I don't think I've ever had an easier way of driving a vehicle to get somewhere. It's just quiet.
Yep.
The only thing you've got is road noise. And I think that, as you get older, like I am, you just deserve a bit of peace and quiet.
Things start slowing down as you get older. That's what I tell people too. I mean, me and Sebastian both had kids, and we've said it before. The days of us hopping in a car and driving 12 hours and stopping 4 times each time for 5 minutes, we can't do that anymore. My back can't do that anymore. And I get to the point now to where I'm rushing my kids eating. I'm like, hey, y'all, we're almost done charging. We need to get back there now. It's been 20 minutes. We waited in line and got our food. We need to get back to the charger. Hurry up. So yeah, it's just we're just at a point in our lives where we just don't have to get there that fast.
I will sort of say, one of the funniest things I used to do when I was driving a diesel or a petrol vehicle is that, of course, you play petrol pump roulette. So you would, see how far you could get to like zero thing. The first time my wife flew over from here, she was coming home to our house in England, and I went and picked her up in the little ID3. And I was determined that I was not going to charge up on the road. I was going to wait till I get home. Well, London from the island is just in the winter, because obviously, summer and winter, you do get mileage changes, temperature changes. Anyway, I think I come back into our little English village on the island with something like 4 miles left in the charge. And she is really freaking out right now. And I think the car then went into some sort of limp mode, and I actually rolled onto the driveway, flashing 0 and everything, flashing red and everything like this. And I thought I'd won the World Cup, and I was celebrating like you wouldn't believe. She looked at me and, in no certain words, threatened me with an inch of my life that if I ever did that again, she was going to perform all sorts of unnecessary surgery on me. That was quite funny. But it was good. Self-censoring. I wouldn't do it again, mind. It was quite nerve-wracking.
Well, Graham, thank you so much for joining us today in the podcast and sharing your EV experiences from across the pond. If we have any European EV owners on the listening on the podcast today, feel free to share your EV experiences as well. You can drop them in the comments below. And don't forget, before you leave today, to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification icon. Thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode. So long, everyone.
Bye, guys.